All right. I would like to call the meeting of the CMAQ Project Selection Committee to order. Elliot, if you could go do roll call.
Yes, as I state your name, please say if you're present, and if you're an alternate for someone, please state your name and that you're an alternate for them. First, Darwin Burkhart.
Here.
Doug Ferguson.
Here.
Mark Pitstick.
Here.
Mayor Schelke. Chris Schmidt. Chris Snyder.
This is Jackie Forbes. I believe I'm sitting in for Chris for
Yes,
county.
thank you.
Thank you.
And Jeff Schreiber.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
All right. Moving along to item 2, agenda changes and announcements. I just have one quick announcement. I'd like to welcome Yusuf Salama, CMAP's new Deputy Executive Director for Research Analysis and Programming. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of him in the near term. Yusuf, would you like to say anything to the committee?
I'll be very brief. Good morning, everyone. I think I may have seen about half of this audience about an hour and a half ago, and no amateur mistakes this time. I got my mic to work, so 1 for 2 today. Listen, happy to meet all of you, and I certainly look forward to getting to know all of you moving forward and develop some very meaningful relationships around the work that we're doing. Doug, I know you got a very heavy schedule ahead of you, so I'll keep it short. And best of luck this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yusuf. All right, moving on to 3.0, approval of the minutes. Draft minutes from May 13th were posted. Do I have a motion?
Pitstick motions to approve.
Thank you, Mark. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes as presented? Okay, hearing none. Elliot, will you do a roll call?
Darwin Burkhart.
Aye.
Doug Ferguson.
Aye.
Mark Pitstick.
Aye.
Mayor Schelke. Chris Schmidt. Jackie Forbes.
Aye.
And Jeff Schreiber.
Jeff, I saw your mouth move, but I didn't hear any sound.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Seems to be having trouble with GoToMeeting today. That was happening on the previous meeting.
Yeah, that's the story of the day.
We'll look for a thumbs up next time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. The minutes, the motion passes. Moving on to program monitoring. As is typical, status sheets of the actively programmed projects were presented for the committee's review, along with an obligation, goal, and summary sheet. I would add that we are still for federal fiscal year 2021, we're still in the negative on obligations. Once again, this is because there were de-obligations that occurred on previously obligated projects, and the addition of the lack of projects that are sitting in advanced construction status haven't been converted. We have a total of 87 million in advanced construction. Projects are still moving forward, but when they do move forward, the obligation is going immediately into AC. So while we are monitoring this, I don't think there is anything that we can do outside of working with project sponsors to bill and convert AC status to active obligations. So with that, are there any questions on the sheets as provided? All right, hearing none, we're moving on to the 2017-2021 RTA Interagency Signage Program. Mark is here to give us an update on that program and the potential to expand it. Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Doug. How are you going to do that? You're going to go through the slides, right? You're going to advance them? I'll tell them. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, There's a item in the project changes that's a little later that we'll take action on. Just wanted to present on this. This is a program that Kevin Stansfield and I have been working on for a number of years at the RTA in cooperation with a number of other agencies. I'll go ahead to the next slide. So we want to talk about our signage program. I'm going to give you a little bit of background of that. We're going to highlight some of the recent recently completed work. Then we're going to talk about what we have planned next, and we'll answer any questions at the end. Kevin will help me answer those questions. Next slide. The purpose of this program is to improve the connections between the transit agencies. So we have an extensive regional transit system with 3 different operators, and because of the history of the development of the transit system here, those services aren't always nicely connected. So we did, a number of years ago, we did some basic user research to see what problems people have with the using the system. We came up with a number of ways to improve coordination. Most specifically was information coordination. That was where the RTA has the most purview, and we had been doing some work on that with Systems Map and online trip planning center. So we did some user testing in the lab and in the field with some prototypes on information products, and based on that, we secured our first set of Cmac grants. This was about 15 years ago, about 2 million Cmac grants for developing design standards for a number of products and deploying those products at 4 pilot locations throughout the region. The products include things like wayfinding maps, transit identity products, and lots of maps showing where the service goes and what time they're departing. So you'll see some examples of that. Then based on the pilots, we learned a lot from that in developing the standards, and we secured a second CMAQ grant for about $4 million. That was in 2008, I believe, maybe 2012. And we used that to implement the signage at 19 key interagency locations throughout the region. We used that to fund engineering and design contracts and 3 separate contracts for fabricating and installing the signs at those locations. I'm happy to report that that work is now completed, and we have approximately just over $1 million remaining, and that's what we want to talk about at the end. This work has involved extensive coordination with the service staff at the service boards and the municipalities for all these locations, as well as private railroads and some private property owners. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide shows the locations that we've implemented signs at. The red dots show the pilot locations or demo locations that we did in 2012. Those were at near the Van Buren Street Station in downtown Chicago, Joliet Union Station, Davis Station in Evanston, and bus transfer location in Evergreen Park, Chicago. Then the presentation today is going to really focus on the more recently completed work over the last 5 years at the 19 locations shown in blue, and I'll go over those and highlight some of those locations. Next slide. This shows the first batch of locations that we implemented in 2017 and 18. These were the Elgin Transportation Center, the Harvey Transportation Center, Lake Cook Road Metro Station, the Lisle Metro Station, and Naperville Metro Station also has Amtrak there. In the city of Chicago, we have the Montrose Cta Station and the Mayfair Metro Station, which are near each other, and near the downtown, the Roosevelt CTA stations and the Museum Campus Metro stations. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give you some of those locations, not show all of them, just a few. This is at the Elgin Transportation Center. The Metro Station is just across the street from the Pace Transportation Center, and but you can't always see one from the other, so We put signs in there to help people make those connections and navigate. The photo on the left is at the metro station. It shows some of the maps. We have a train connection map and a neighborhood map there. There's similar maps over at the PACE facility. On the right, that's looking from the end of the metro station over towards the PACE facility. Those directional signs help people find the crosswalk there that the city added at our request between the two stations. Next slide, please. This is at Harvey. We have the Metro Electric Station, which is the platforms are above grade, and the PACE Transportation Center is just across the street and about a block away. The photo on the left shows one of the overhead signs above the exit from the Metro platform, showing people that that's the exit to take to get to the PACE buses. And the sign on the right is a set of maps at the PACE facility, which show the routes of all the maps, all the bus routes that stop there, and these departure times and where those routes go. So if you're trying to get to a facility like a courthouse, it'll tell you which route to take and which boarding area to use. Next slide. This is near the downtown, just south of downtown Chicago. This is at the Roosevelt CTA station and the Metro Museum Campus Station. So the Metro station is located in the park, below grade. The CTA stations are above and below ground on Roosevelt, just west of Michigan. This sign on the left is a sign along Michigan Avenue near the park, showing how to get to both of the stations there, the rail stations. And the sign on the right is at the CTA station. It's a downtown map for the transit in the downtown area, just outside the CTA station. Next slide. So in the Bundle 2 locations we completed in 2019 and 2020, those include the Aurora Transportation Center, the Harlem Lakes CTA and Oak Park Metro Station in Oak Park, the Irving Park CTA and Metro Stations in Chicago, the Jefferson Park Transportation Center in Chicago, the Main Street CTA and Metro Stations in Evanston, the Waukegan Metro Station and PACE facility, and the Wheaton Metro Station and PACE stops. This photo here is at the Main Street station, looking from the Metro station towards the CTA on the elevated viaduct there. Next slide. This is at the Aurora Transportation Center. The city of Aurora has recently reconfigured that facility so that the PACE bus stops are adjacent to the Metro tracks. As you can see in both of these photos here, the photo on the left shows one of our signs at the new PACE bus shelter. Inside those shelters, there are bus connection diagrams like we saw before. On the right-hand side is installation of a large sign structure for maps between the buses and the trains there. We will put that in just behind. City of Aurora had just recently installed a interactive kiosk right there, so we had to lift that structure over and around that kiosk to install it. We had a little bit of a race to install those signs there. They beat us though. Next slide. This is at Jefferson Park Transit Center. There's Metro Station, CTA Station, and major bus terminal there for CTA and PACE buses. The sign on the left, the photo on the left shows installation of a large structure for signs on the windbreak of the center Metro platform. The sign on the right is a facility map showing all the different train bus connections there. And that's located outside one of the bus terminals that were recently rebuilt by CTA there at Jefferson Park. Next slide. This is in Waukegan. We have the Metro station is down below the bluff, and the PACE buses, some of them go down to the Metro station, most do not. They terminate at a transfer facility on Sheridan Road above the bluff. These photos on the left shows installation again with a crane of the large map structure at the Metro station. And the photo on the right shows the a bus stop, one of the bus stops up at the top of the bluff along Sheridan Road. Let's go to the next slide. The Bundle 3 locations were recently completed late last year and this spring. This included the Blue Island metro stations in Blue Island, 2 of them next to each other, and then several the major downtown locations, Union Station, LaSalle Street Station, Millennium Station, and Ogilvie. We had done some work previously at Union Station and LaSalle Street Station, but we did some additional work there and some new work at Millennium and Ogilvie. This sign here shows one of the signs at the LaSalle Street Station, helping people get from the metro platforms to past and around the buildings there, the Board Options Exchange Building, to the CTA trains. That's a private building. Next slide then. Blue Island, we just completed that work. Most of that work, we have 2 metro stations across the street from each other and various pace bus routes through town. Several of them are on Western Avenue a few blocks away. The photo on the left shows a new bus stop where we have bus stop signs and maps there, including departure information. And the sign on the right is a directional sign between the 2 metro stations. There's a crosswalk there. We didn't fully complete that work. Metro is going to be doing a project there later this year into next year, and they'll install the remaining signs as part of their project. The next slide, please. Ogilvie Transportation Center has, CTA station nearby and multiple CTA bus routes surrounding the station. There's multiple ways to get in and out to the metro trains. Only one of those is accessible. Our signs help to delineate the accessible path from those bus stops and the train and the CTA station to the metro trains. This is the sign on the left is one of the signs outside one of the metro entrances, helping people make that determination for the accessible path. And the sign on the right is a sign above the sidewalk. It's hanging from the viaduct that carries the metro tracks over that sidewalk. Next slide, please. LaSalle Street Station has a metro terminal that's above grade. There are CTA bus stops nearby. There are 2 CTA stations, an elevated and a subway station nearby also. So there's a lot of vertical movement plus the horizontal movement around the building that I showed you before. The sign on the right is at the top of the stairs, connecting the metro platforms to the bus intermodal facility that I believe CDOT built about 10 years ago. There's an elevator and stairs there. Sign on the left is just finished and transferred to CTA. CTA will be installing this sign and one very much like it, attaching those to the elevated structures near the CTA stations and the Metro LaSalle Street Station to help people find the metro station, just hidden behind several large buildings. So we're really excited about that, working closely with Metro and CTA on getting those signs installed next month or potentially in August. So we've done a lot. The next slide, please. Done a lot in the last 5 years. We've completed our vision to implement signs at 19 key locations. We did it's over 1,000 signs, well over 1,000 signs. We had several contracts and we completed that work. We have approximately $1.2 million left in our Cmac grant. With this committee's permission, we would like to continue that work and do some additional locations, approximately a dozen additional locations, focusing in the city and Cook County. We would need, in order to do that, we'll be procuring engineering and design services this year and entering into a sign fabrication and installation contract next year. The other thing I want to mention is that we are using the federal funds to implement these signs, but we have a separate RTA-funded maintenance program. We have a multi-year contract for that, or actually on our second multi-year contract for that. RTA staff does some of that work, and then we have a contractor do anything that's complicated. So we have done a lot, and we want to do a little bit more with the remaining funds, and that's on the agenda a little bit later. I think that's really the end of my presentation. There's a report that is a companion to this. It talks a little bit about all this. Most of the same photos with some additional photos and a interactive map, story map feature. Those can be found on the RTA website. They're hosted on, the report is hosted on RTAMS, but the links can be found for those on the RTA website if you look for the interagency signage. So I think that's everything I wanted to say. Kevin, anything important that I forgot you want to add?
No, I would just say that it's actually on the front page of the RTA website for all the information about our program. It's highlighted. It's one of the highlighted programs this month.
Okay. That's all I wanted to say. Any questions from anybody here? I'll be glad to, Kevin and I'd be glad to entertain any questions.
Well, thanks, Mark. I just have one quick question. As far as the additional locations, has there been any, have those been identified at this point in time, or?
We have a list we're working on, and we're working with the service boards and the municipalities before we lock into that. But we have a number of locations that we've done some field work at and done some preliminary work. So we got about 9 to 12 locations, and then we may add a few. One of the things that that kind of complicates that a little bit is that if you go back to the one, go back one slide, maybe two. There's that sign there, the overhead electric sign. We're trying to put some signs like that at metro stations where they have elevated platforms that are entered from viaducts or tunnels, and because a lot of those places are kind of dark, or you don't really see where the metro stations are, and so we're working with Metro to identify those. So we may do some of those at a number of locations where we would fabricate those signs and design them, and then we'd have Metro install them. So don't exactly have the number of locations pinned down just yet.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Mark or Kevin?
From CDOT, I have more of a comment than a question. Can everybody hear me? All right.
Yes,
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say that I will actually compliment Mark and Kevin and their whole team on all the work that's been done, particularly in the city I'm most familiar with. But it's really been a big improvement. It's very noticeable. And I also wanted to say that in relation to the last round of CMAQ funding, the city secured the funding for a comprehensive wayfinding program in the pedway system, which also connects a number of different transit facilities. And in lead up to that, we've been working on developing some what we're calling sort of interim signage or pilot signage. And RTA, Mark and Kevin and the whole team, and as well as the CTA and Metro have all been extraordinarily cooperative. We're sort of developing new some standards that are based upon sort of a close cousin to the RTA's comprehensive signage that sort of gives a pedway identity, but still keeps in very much in the flavor of what this is for easy understandability, I guess. And we're just doing this using city funding. They're going to be adhesive vinyl signs and just give us the opportunity to like try things out and experiment while we're getting the bigger comprehensive program up and running. But just want to say this has all been really helpful. We wouldn't have been able to just pull together our interim stuff that had RTA not had all this experience with doing this project. So I think we're seeing dividends sprouting in many different areas from all of this work. So just wanted to share that with the whole group.
All All right. Well, I know we have the item under the project changes to discuss expanding the scope. If there aren't any other questions about that, I think we'll move on to the project changes. Are there any other additional questions for Mark or Kevin? All right. Well, hearing none, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Jeff, for those comments.
And moving on to item 5.0, project changes. Elliot, you want to take us through what was submitted for committee consideration today?
Sure, thanks, Doug. The CMAQ staff received 9 total change requests. Per procedures adopted by the committee at the May 13th meeting, 3 of these met the definition of an administrative modification. So staff processed these requests and approved each. A summary of these requests is included in the project change request memo as part of your packet. The remaining 6 requests are presented to the committee for consideration. First is Northfield Skokie Valley Trail improvements. It's approved for $240,000 TAP for phase 2 engineering in 2021. The sponsor is requesting to move the existing $240,000 to fiscal year 2022, and also a cost increase of $379,800 TAP for phase 2 engineering in 2022. The cost increase is needed due to the increasing complexity of the project design and required addendum to the PDR. Staff recommends the approval of this request. The second request is IDOT's Illinois Route 59 Sutton Road at West Bartlett Road project. It is approved for $456,000 Cmac for right-of-way in 2021, which has already been obligated. Also, $2,184,000 in Cmac for construction is currently deferred. The sponsor is requesting to reinstate the $2,184,000 Cmac and also a cost increase of $1,656,000 for construction in 2021. The original funding was allowed to sunset with the understanding that it would be reinstated at a higher cost due to additional turning lanes being added to the project at the request of the municipality. Right-of-way has been acquired and the project is currently scheduled for the November letting. Staff recommends the approval of these requests. The third project is IDOT's Illinois Route 19 Irving Park Road at Barrington Road project. It is approved for $552,000 Cmac for right-of-way in 2021, which has been obligated, and $2,221,000 Cmac for construction in 2021. The sponsor is requesting a cost increase of $174,000 for construction in 2021 after a final engineer's estimate of costs. Staff recommends the approval of this request. Next is Mount Prospect's Rand Central Mount Prospect Road Intersections project. It's currently approved for $421,840 Cmac for engineering phase 2 engineering in 2021, which is in advanced construction. $314,960 Cmac for right-of-way in 2022, and $4,640,240 for construction and construction engineering in 2023. The sponsor is requesting a cost increase of $405,040 for CMAQ for right-of-way in 2022 due to updated land acquisition costs. And staff recommends the approval of this request. The fifth project is IDOT's Jefferson Street Intersection Safety and Congestion Reduction Project at US Route 52 and Interstate 55 southbound ramps. The project is approved for $294,728 CMAQ for phase 2 engineering, which has been obligated, and $1,908,560 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering in 2022. The sponsor is requesting to advance the existing $1,908,560 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering from federal fiscal year 2022 to 2021, and a cost increase of $1,894,000 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering in 2021. The request reflects updated construction cost estimates from the approved Phase 1 estimate. The project is targeting the November letting. Staff recommends the approval of these requests. And finally, as Mark presented previously, the RTA is requesting a scope change for their interagency signage program. It was originally approved for $3,780,000 CMAQ in 2012. Sponsors requesting a scope change to increase the number of locations for implementation using approximately $1.2 million in unspent funds. At this time, no cost increase is requested. Staff recommends the approval of this request. And with that, I don't have anything else, so I can open up the floor for discussion and any questions you might have.
Thank you, Elliot. Before we open it up, do we have a motion on the table?
Jackie Forbes, so moved.
Thank you, Jackie. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. Do we have any questions or discussion on the project changes as presented? Several of the sponsors are here to ask or to answer any additional questions that may have come up with some of these that you have. All right. Well, hearing no questions, we do have a motion on the table for approval of the cost changes as presented. Elliot, will you do the roll call?
Darwin Burkhart.
Aye.
Doug Ferguson.
Aye.
Mark Pitstick.
Aye.
Jackie Forbes.
Aye.
Jeff Stryver.
We see Jeff's mouth moving.
Yeah. And note that absences from your Shelkey and Chris Smith.
All right. Well, thank you. The motion passes and the changes are approved. Moving along to item 6.0, the FY 2022 to 2026 program development. The staff posted last week a staff recommended program for both the CMAQ and TAP programs. At this point in time, there are a couple of additional changes from what was originally posted that I'd like to make note to the committee. The first is for the TAP program, we did add an additional amount of funding for the Streamwood project. It was a little over $300,000. This was due to changes with the STP shared fund. So it went from 1.8 to 2.1. And then with the CMAQ program, while we were developing this program, the ITEP program was released. There was one project that was included for funding that has since received received ITEP funds that was missed in our program development process. That was the Highland Park bike facility project as part of the Green Bay Road reconstruction project for $2 million. So that is being removed from the staff recommended program. With that, I just want to highlight a couple of things. The proposed funding, highlight the first project on the list. That was Lake County's connected vehicle demonstration project. As you'll note, there is no scoring associated with the demonstration projects. Due to the demonstration nature of the project, it's hard for staff to evaluate, and the county is committed to doing before and after studies with a report that will be turned over to FHWA as part of the project. The before and after study will be conducted using Lake County funds and not CMAQ funding. So the CMAQ funding will only be for the connected vehicle program. With that, staff is recommending approval of the project as part of it, even though it's not scored. Um, a lot of times the CMAQ program is one of the few sources for doing these kind of demonstration projects. We haven't had one in many years, but staff feels strongly that this is a good program to study and has the potential for improvements throughout the region with its completion. There were several projects that received partial funding in the staff recommended CMAQ program. The first being the Metro Alternative Fuels Locomotive Project. The staff is recommending approval for half of the request for the first phase of the project. There's always the potential for it to come back in at a later date and time. The second was the Cta Electric Bus Program. It's providing it's included for only half the requested amount at $44 million, and it should be added that this is a prior funded project that currently has $15.6 million in 2021 and $23.5 million in 2023. So we feel that just giving it the first initial year of being requested keeps the project moving forward. The third one in the CTA, the third one in the proposed program is the CTA Redline Extension Project. The project was requesting $135 million. Staff, due to where it fell in the rankings, and also just due to the size, is included the project for $30 million. $20 million of that will cover the first two phases of the request, with plus an additional $10 million to help with the local contribution for this regionally significant project. So what we have here is a programming mark of $218.7 million. For the CMAQ program, staff is recommending funding for $215 million, and includes 4 bicycle facilities, 19 traffic flow improvements, and 9 transit improvements. There were 3 transit projects that were using toll development credits for match, and as mentioned, there were 3 projects recommended for partial funding. Before I move on to TAP, are there any questions on the CMAQ program as presented?
A couple of questions.
Yeah.
One is, and excuse my ignorance if this is an established protocol or something. What, like, if we want to like sort of a debrief from CMAQ on particular projects to maybe understand how to make them more competitive in the future, or understand just generally where how the scoring panned out, is that something that we can request in the months ahead?
Yeah, so CMAP staff is more than willing to sit down and explain how projects were analyzed and scored, and so that we can help in the future potential applications, or just create a better understanding. Yeah, that's definitely something that you can request.
I think there's a couple of city projects at least that I think that would be helpful for, so we know kind of where to how to proceed from here. And then I had another question. Maybe this is sort of higher level. I saw one of the project awards was for the Pace 95th Street, and a BRT type of a project. And I don't know that I'm not entirely sure the limits of that project. And if it's what I'm thinking of, it has part of its limits are within the city, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's all outside the city. But either way, I didn't know whether that project had received the standard sort of phase 1 approvals from IDOT and CDOT if applicable. And that, like, some of these BRT projects sort of straddle, like, are they a transit project or are they a highway project? Actually, yes, right? they're both. And I know, like, with the highway projects, that achieving that phase 1 approval is very important, because it like that defines the project, and that's all of the evaluations are based upon how the project is defined. And in this case, I'm not sure whether the, if in the course of achieving phase 1 approval to make changes to roads, public roads or highways, IDOT jurisdiction roads in this case, could that end up changing the project materially enough that it would have changed the evaluation criteria, and so where do we draw the line between, is it a transit type of a phase 1 approval versus a highway type of a phase 1 approval when it's a transit project on a highway? Does that make sense?
Yes. So in the case of this, it would be not receiving a traditional phase 1 approval because it would be going through FTA, which doesn't have distinct phase 1, phase 2 areas. The PACE does have engineering work that has preceded this that staff felt met the phase 1 requirement. That's not to say that there isn't coordination that has to occur with the operators of the roadway. I don't know if we have anybody from PACE that can talk more detail about the project limits on the call.
Doug, Dave Tomczyk is here. I can speak.
Thanks.
Hi. Yeah, the project limits are on 95th Street from the Dan Ryan 95th CTA station west to Harlem Avenue, and then it will terminate at Moraine Valley College. The project is similar to our current pulse lines on Milwaukee and Dempster, where there's no going to be busways or bus lanes. It's going to be more the TSP, which we already have in play programmed and for 95th Street, and it'll be the bus station improvements along the corridor.
And Dave, okay, me if I'm wrong, I believe that it also includes funding for initial service. Is that correct?
We didn't apply for the funding on 95th Street. That was for Dempster for the third year that we had funding for the service on Dempster that's already been allocated.
Jeff, does that answer your questions, at least initially?
Yeah, no, okay, that's good to know that it's not like bus lanes or stuff like that. Maybe I'm conflating this a bit with the nature of improvements that have been proposed along Halsted, I think, which was also submitted, which was potentially much more extensive, but we're still in a lot of discussions, on what exactly is appropriate for that corridor.
Yeah, correct, Jeff. You are correct. The Halsted is more, I would say, intense in terms of the infrastructure that we're looking at versus what 95th Street is. 95th Street, like I said, would be more similar to what's already in place on Milwaukee and what we're in construction on Dempster.
Looking at the project description on 95th, and it did talk about like adding service. But so you're saying that that's not part of the current description?
Well, the service would be adjusted, and we would add a higher level of service, but we didn't request those funds at this time. We advanced the construction, and we will come back at a later date on the next round. Similar to what we did on Dempster.
Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
This is Leah Mooney from CTA. Can I offer a clarification on South Halsted as well, just because it came up? Jeff, we're actively revisiting the scope for that in light of the CDOT comments, and so that's still something that's going to be under discussion as part of a future coordination with you guys.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks for letting me jump in.
And can I just add a few comments here too? This is Mark Pitstick. Jeff, this is sort of a pattern that PACE has followed. They've implemented the one on the Pulse on Milwaukee. They got implementation funds first and then operating funds, and they work closely with IDOT on that. And there was a lot of back and forth with IDOT. And now they previously received funding for the implementation on Dempster, And this round, they're recommended for the operating funds, and then they're asking for the implementation funds now for 95th, and they'll come back later and ask for the operating funds. So, and work again closely with IDOT and CDOT. And, they've kind of worked the bugs out on that, I think. So should be okay.
Yeah, and Jeff, we currently have a TSP project on 95th Street. It's west of Western right now that is being ready for implementation.
Jeff, we can't hear you. Sorry.
I said nothing else for me. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, hearing none, I'm going to move on to the TAP-L program. So as mentioned before, we did increase the funding slightly for the Streamwood project, which was ID 0321003. We're proposing a staff recommended program of $22.4 million, which includes 12 bicycle facilities. Two of the projects are requesting funds for phase one engineering only. So just as a reminder, those projects will only be programmed for phase one. They'll have to request in a subsequent call funding for the remaining portions of the project. There are three projects that are requesting match using highway toll development credits. And there's two projects that are being recommended for partial funding. Those two partial funding projects are the Lake County, Illinois Route 137 bike path. So that was there's two distinct phases of the application. One is referred to as the overall stage one and the other one stage four. We're recommending funding for the stage four portion. It did receive $2 million in ITEP funding for the stage four. And so the funding that we're proposing for that project will complete the remainder of the funding for stage four. We are not proposing funding for stage one at this point in time. And the second one is the Streamwood project, which received some funding from the STP shared fund. We are proposing the remainder of that to make it complete for funding. And that's the Illinois 59 bicycle pedestrian overpass. So with that, are there any questions on the staff recommended TAP-L program? All right, hearing none, we are asking for the committee to release a draft program of projects for public comment starting today. The public comment period will last through July 30th, at which point in time we'll collect all the comments received on the programs as proposed and bring those back for the committee's consideration in September. Do I have a motion, or are there any additional comments or questions?
Doug, I'll make that motion. It's Mark Bitstick. I move that the committee release the staff recommended program as adjusted today for public comment over the month of July.
Thank you, Mark. Do I have a second?
Driver, second.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. Any additional comments or questions before we go to a roll call? All right. Hearing none. Elliot, will you do a roll call?
Darwin Burkhart.
Aye.
Doug Ferguson.
Aye.
Mark Pitstick.
Aye.
Mayor Schelke. Chris Schmidt.
Jackie Forbes. Aye.
Jess Driver.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. So the programs will be released for public comment through July 30th. Look forward to hearing from everybody. And with that, we're going to move on to the public comment period of the meeting. As we did not receive any public comments prior to the meeting, is there anybody in the audience that wishes to address the committee? Please, you'll need to unmute yourself and identify yourself, please. All right, Elliot, has anybody indicated to you that they wish to make a public comment? I just want to make sure before we move on.
Yeah, seeing none in the chat and no one has contacted me.
Okay. All right, with no public comment, the next meeting, which is not July 1st, because that's today. That slide did not get corrected. My apologies. It should be correct on the agenda, and it is Thursday, September 9th at 11 a.m. Is there any other business that committee members wish to bring before the committee?
Motion to adjourn.
Well, you can do a motion. I was just going to adjourn it if there's no other business before the committee. I'd like to thank you all for participating today. And I apologize for just getting the meeting going was a little bit more difficult today than usual.
Thanks to all the CMAP staff for all the hard work and doing all this evaluation. No, it's a very rigorous process and it takes a lot of time and energy. So appreciate that.
We appreciate that. Thank you. All right. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. Everybody have a happy 4th of July. And we'll be reaching out as the public comments come in.
Thank you. Bye.